Welcome to our Knosh and No. Thank you for being here. I'd like to introduce our Education Chair, Vimal Mitchell. Vimal, can you unmute your mic?
Sorry, here. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, welcome to our first online national. Thank everybody for joining us. So, a couple of things we have. We have another one coming up in 2 weeks from today, June 25th. So, if you haven't signed up, please do. And then today we have a couple of gift cards to give out. So Deb will do the drawing for that today. And I want to thank Casey for putting this on. And if you guys have any questions or you want to do a national, just send me some emails. Thanks again for joining. So we could start with Case. If you want to go ahead and do the start the webinar?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody, my name is Case. I'm gonna get this screen share going really quick for everybody to see. All right, is everybody on board with me here? All right. Let me check one thing. So we're going to go over this presentation. If you guys have questions as they come up, go ahead and type them in the chat. We'll go ahead and review some of them at the end. We'll do our best to get through as many as possible. And I'll be putting up a lot of information, CDC guidelines, OSHA guidelines, and some other information along with my contact info so you guys can get in touch with me if you do have any questions. So as long as we're good, Debbie and Vimal, I think we'll get started here. Everyone good to go? Hope so. All right, guys. My name is Case. I'm with I live in Golden, Colorado. I've been working here at Allphase for about 6 years, and in the construction industry for about a total of 10 or so. I'm originally from the DC area. I lived kind of all up and down the East Coast, but made my way out here to Denver in 2007, where I attended University of Denver. Here at Allphase, I oversee our mitigation and environmental department. And in my role, I've been paying pretty close attention to our national COVID response, but more importantly, our local and city response. We've been helping local businesses here plan, prepare and execute some reopenings as we're transitioning into the safer at home phase. The purpose of our discussion today is to review some CDC and OSHA recommendations and guidelines as they as they relate to reopening businesses and other facilities as restrictions are kind of generally eased. I think you're probably going to be familiar with a lot of the stuff in here, but I do hope that you find some of this valuable. And again, if you do have questions that pop up, go ahead and type those into the chat, and we'll spend some time at the end here answering those if possible. And we will have a few questions here to get started. So let's see. Before we get started, I want to know a little bit more about you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and toss up some polling questions. If you could, just for those of us who aren't calling in but are on a computer or phone, if you can, we'll try and get these polling questions up. I'm not extremely familiar with this, so please bear with me as we get these up, if possible. Here. Debbie, are you able to throw those questions up there?
I made you the host, so let's see. It should be at the bottom there.
All right.
Click the poll.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I'm not able to change my view for some reason. Well, this is like all Zoom meetings, some technical difficulties. So let's see. Oh man, sorry guys. This worked so easily when we tested it earlier.
I know.
I'm going to stop my screen share really quick. Here we go. All right. I am going to launch this right now. And please, everybody participate as best you can.
There you go.
Just want to find out, are we working from home? Are we working from the office? Or are we on a rotating schedule? Do you have a COVID policy in place right now where you're working or at home? If you've seen examples of social distancing in your personal experiences, and overall, do you think local requirements are adequate, or we need to do more, and have you acquired any new equipment, if you have, for new policies. So we'll hopefully get up at least over 50% here on that. And another few minutes to get some more answers in. A couple more seconds and we'll get moving on. Okay, so it appears most of you guys are still all working from home, which is fair to be expected, but some people are back in the office full time, and a few of you are kind of doing a rotating schedule. Good to see that almost everybody does have a policy in place in the workplace, or maybe it's at home and you don't have one. But I figured everybody would have seen some examples of our social distancing, right? Everyone's gone to the grocery store. Everybody's seen the lines on the ground and the sneeze guards. And yeah, good to see people find it adequate, but maybe there is more that can be done. And it's also good to see that we're making an investment in some new equipment for our plans for COVID response. So, all right, well, let's dive into this. Thank you for letting me get to know you guys a little bit. So let's start with a little review of our overall COVID timeline here in Colorado. The first cases were reported in Colorado on March 5th and in Denver March 6th. That's 97 or 98 days ago. So, almost a little over 3 months almost. It's pretty incredible to consider. It feels like it's gone by a little bit more quickly for some, but right around March 11th, WHO declared COVID-19 a pandemic, and the White House soon after declared a national emergency. Following that, we had a stay-at-home order issued by Governor Polis here in Colorado on March 25th. Early April, schools were going to remain closed for the remainder of the year, made that announcement. In the middle of April, Polis issued a mask order for all essential workers who were still working at the time. And towards the end of April, we had our Safer at Home phase outlined, which was to begin in May. Shortly after that, retailers in Denver were allowed to open up for curbside pickup, but not in-person shopping on the end of the end of April there. And on the 28th, our statewide stay-at-home order was lifted, but some cities like Denver or Jefferson County extended theirs for about another week. On the 2nd, Denver ordered masks to be worn in all public spaces. And then here on the 24th, restaurants were allowed to resume in-person dining. Bars and breweries were able to begin reopening with social distancing guidelines. And 2.5 weeks later, here's where we are. I think probably quite a few of you are back in the office, or at least working on plans to get back into your buildings and your facilities. And we're going to go over some of the guidelines the CDC and OSHA are recommending for us here to get things going again, and to do that safely. There are quite a few different approaches, aimed at preventing the spread of COVID-19. The first are administrative controls, meaning, what can you do as a business owner or operator or a representative in a non-physical way to help slow the spread. And that's the important differentiation here is you're not actually physically doing anything aside from communicating some controls through your administration. obviously, we want to pay attention to what our local city and county ordinances are, and what our mandates are for opening, especially as they pertain to your business. Schools are going to be different than hospitals, are going to be different than restaurants. So we want to make sure that we're staying up to date on the most recent directives, at least to open up. And we want to make sure we're in compliance with those, so we don't avoid getting shut down, or we can avoid getting shut down if something does happen. But again, it's the goal is safety and preventing the spread. So another obvious one, if you've got employees who are sick or suspect that they have symptoms, or they may have come into contact with somebody who is, they need to be asked to follow CDC guidelines, quarantine, isolation, and make sure that they're staying away and preventing possible spread. One thing to note is that CDC did not recommend requiring workers to get doctor's notes to come back due to the potential additional tax on our healthcare system. Here in Colorado, I don't think we really saw the healthcare crisis or overcrowding that some other states may have. So that's kind of a personal decision, I think, on your team's part to determine if employees should require a doctor's note to come back to work. But that is one thing that was recommended against from the CDC. So the biggest impact that we're going to have is non-physical impact you can have is to promote social distancing. Again, this is all pretty apparent stuff. Here at All Phase, we've done a couple of following things. We've staggered start times for our mitigation crews. So we'll have one team come in at 8 o'clock. The next team will come in at 8:30. The next team will come in at 9, and so on and so forth. All of our guys are in the same vehicle every day. They don't swap vehicles. They don't get a chance to drive a different one. They have all of their own tools, and they're not sharing tools. And we've got a couple new policies here regarding our equipment going into and out of homes, and disinfecting that. Just one example of an industry. I know it's going to be different for many of the attendees here today, but another big method here is virtual meetings, just like what we're doing now. I think several people probably are remiss at the opportunity to have invested in Zoom stock. But hopefully folks are finding it an effective replacement for in-person meetings. We also want to try and allow some flexible work schedules, which can mean alternating office attendance depending on the group. So that could be one week you have group A in, and on the next week you have group B in and rotated. So you're minimizing your risk exposure. We also want to limit or deny access to rooms. We want to close off break rooms, close off cafeterias, or if you've got a copy room, limit it to one person at a time. Provide them with alternative areas to deal with what their needs. So whether that's closing off cafeterias and providing individual food service, or requesting people bring their own lunch in. That's just another option for some social distancing, obviously. And I know that most of you are familiar with these things. So we also want to make sure, most importantly, that we're communicating our plans and our controls with our customers, but also our customers, our employees, and our service providers. And we want to make sure that we're getting our service providers protocols as well. And Vimal, yes, I know I still have to send you ours. I apologize, I haven't gotten over to you yet. And make sure that their protocols are in line with yours. So we are all on the same page and working together to prevent that spread. So one other thing that they want to bring attention to is that there are individual risk factors that we can cater to. If we've got high risk personnel or potentially visitors, depending on your facility, we want to be a little bit more flexible in how we can care for them. If you've got someone that's a little bit older, or somebody that's got an immunocompromised condition, or you've got pregnant women coming into your facility for some reason, then we might need to go a little bit overboard on some of our distancing practices for them, and take extra care with them. So the next kind of breakdown for our guidelines are going to be our engineering controls. And the difference between engineering controls and administrative controls are that administrative are non-physical. It's kind of communicating your policies to your employees and your customers, while engineering controls are a little bit are physical. So I'm certain everybody has seen an example of this. You kind of mentioned that in the polls. You've been to the grocery stores. You've seen the sneeze guards. You've seen the tape lines on the ground. You've seen the tables in between the registers, keeping people away. But this is going in and physically removing or preventing behavior, and trying to at least trying to take out the human element from the situation, which is a pretty cost-effective way. Doesn't take a lot of training to prevent somebody from being able to get within 6 feet of your cash register or something of that nature. So you have to take the whole workplace into consideration when you're coming up with your engineering controls. It's also very important to take into consideration the feasibility and the effectiveness. Wrong scroll place, excuse me. When you if you were overseeing a grocery store, it's one thing to put up sneeze guards at every checkout lane, but what might be more feasible and more effective would be to close every other lane or every third lane, and prevent it that way. So minimizing the risk by preventing your employees from being there, but also making sure that you're taking full stock of your workspace and making sure that your actual physical barriers or controls are effective. So some examples you may see are just moving or removing furniture. You see a lot of restaurants that are opening are removing their patio furniture, and limiting the amount of seating that's available. We're closing off our shared workspaces, closing off lounges, but physically locking the doors or preventing access into those. Grocery stores are moving their card readers further away from the cashiers, and you're seeing that in almost all retail as well. Businesses are offering curbside pickup or delivery, and scheduling customers by appointment only. Another thing to consider is if you've got multiple entrances in your building or buildings, is creating a flow of traffic. So, have one side of your building an entrance and one side an exit. Obviously, being in the construction trade, Home Depot has remained open, and I've had to go there quite frequently. And their busier stores have one entry and one exit, and they only allow certain people in. It's only a certain amount of people in at a time. Preventing repeated exposures in the same areas is another way that we're using some engineering controls. So some of the less obvious considerations we should discuss are your HVAC systems. Not only can you install some higher efficiency air filters, and making sure that they're sealed well to your ducts. We want to trap airborne particulate, even if it's maybe not so effective or it's not been proven to effective to grab the virus. But airborne particulate in general, we want to promote that healthy airspace and indoor air quality, but also running our systems longer. Most commercial buildings are going to rely on your HVAC systems to bring in fresh air to your spaces. So running the systems for a longer period of time and disabling the on-demand air system. So, your home thermostat has a fan mode that's either auto or on. And if you turn that fan on, you're gonna increase the amount of fresh air that you're bringing in through the home and increasing your exchange rates. So they also suggest opening up your fresh air dampers to allow more fresh air, so you're not recirculating as much. So another thing to consider. The next thing is we want to maintain a healthy working environment. Sanitation and hygiene are very important. Restaurants, you see the hand washing signs all the time, but coronavirus is a threat, but it doesn't mean that we can't get sick with something else. The flu is still a possibility. You can get a cold, and then having a compromised immune system can increase the dangers of coronavirus. So promoting hygiene is another engineering control we would like to do, providing tissues, but specifically things like no-touch trash cans, no-touch hand soap or sanitizer dispensers, and disposable towels, and the documentation on how to use those are also ways we can promote some sanitation, some hygiene. We also want to take into account spaces where there haven't been workers present for extended periods of time. It's important to note that if you do have any pre-existing conditions that might have gotten worse in your absence, so I'm referring back to HVAC systems and plumbing. Plumbing lines certainly are of particular note. If your building has been closed down for weeks or more, you could potentially have some microbes or some mold growth in your plumbing lines. P-traps, the moisture of the water in P-traps can evaporate. You might have some foul smells coming from that sort of thing. CDPHE, along with CDC, have recommended that you flush all your systems. So HVAC systems, obviously, if they haven't been running, but plumbing, both your hot and cold taps at every single service, they recommend running it for a few minutes, 10 to 15 minutes or more, just to make sure we're getting a full flush of the system. And then the same, OSHA suggests the same thing for your HVAC system. They'll recommend performing indoor air quality tests prior to having employees go back into the systems, and not necessarily to test for the presence of coronavirus, but to make sure that the air quality in general is clean and acceptable, so that we're not promoting any illness otherwise, which could lead to immunocompromisation. In our experience, what we see for testing is about $700 for a preliminary test, and it scales depending on the size of the building and the amount of tests that need to be taken. So if you guys do have questions, or you want some information on some hygienists or industrial hygienists that can help you with this, just let me know, and I will send you some contact information and give you some references.
We have one question.
Yes.
Stephen wanted to know if there are any issues with treating your on-site cafeteria like the restaurants are doing. Food deliveries are not allowed. That opens up your lobby to visitors who can potentially spread the virus.
So if you're, as long as you have a full plan in place, and we'll touch on some of this a little bit more, I don't see any issues personally with that. There are no specific recommendations towards cafeterias. In workplaces, they do have specific guidance for cafeterias, and I can provide the link for that. We'll touch on it a little bit, but no, not a problem treating your own cafeteria. If you do like restaurants, again, limiting the amount of seating, limiting the amount of people that are in there, and increasing your cleaning and disinfecting frequency. Certainly not an issue if you are having trouble with finding ways for your employees to eat, and instead of requiring them to bring their own food. So, David, please let me know if you have more questions popping up. My screens are kind of covering the chat. So,
Okay.
All right. So another kind of subset of our CDC and OSHA guidelines are employee training. This is obviously part of your administrative controls. Everybody has heard of safe work practices, which is, the aim of those is to reduce the duration, frequency, or the intensity of your exposure to a risk. And I think we all kind of understand that there's a new risk involved for everybody, which is potential exposure to COVID-19. I want to make sure that we're creating some policies that are helping to reduce that. And again, this is a little bit of repetition, so bear with me. We want to, promote regular hand washing. Again, restaurants have this. You see it everywhere you go and to get a bit to eat. But now we can definitely expand that to all of our businesses. We have that here in our office down in Littleton. We've got hand washing stations. We obviously have access to bathrooms, but we've got hand sanitizer stations as well. We want to promote good housekeeping. Clean work areas are safe work areas, but they're also easier to disinfect, which we'll get into a little bit more. So, if you do have employees going back into the office or going into other workplaces, we want to make sure that we're doing our best to keep those spaces a little bit more clean than usual, so that not only are we reducing the amount of items that could potentially be affected, but we're also providing either our janitorial staff or our service providers or our own employees an easier way to clean and disinfect. So we also want to train on face coverings, when to use, how to clean them, when we need to replace them. Obviously, you're going to have the mandates for most places. You're going to see a lot of people wearing face coverings. I haven't seen any particular regulation on mask wearing once you are in your own office, but certainly in your public and shared spaces, the recommendation is to wear non-medical face coverings, so cloth masks that you see a lot of people wearing. Again, also want to train your employees on social distancing, not just personal social distancing, but enforcement in your facilities as well, especially if you have you're a retailer or a service provider, making sure that your customers that are coming through your doors are following your policies and procedures. And then you want to train them on the use of PPE. So a lot of what we'll talk about here is cleaning and disinfecting. And disinfectants a lot of times require PPE, but it also, now that you're using more PPE or have a requirement for some, we need to make sure that your employees are being trained on that and using it correctly. Engineering controls and administrative controls are considered kind of more effective options before we have to go out and buy PPE, but it may be necessary to prevent risk for your workers. We want to make sure that we're using it correctly, not using it as a sole replacement for other social distancing strategies. But we want to make sure that we're using the workplace and conducting a hazard assessment to make sure that we're using the right PPE. So, you've seen respirators, full face, half face, goggles, face shields, and then other types of respiratory protection, supplied air respirators. But we have to make sure that we know what our employees are going to be exposed to. So if you already have a respiratory protection program at your workplace, like we certainly do here at Allphase, the chances are you're going to see an increased need for PPE, so additional levels. If you work in an office environment, you probably won't see the need for a full face respirator or a half face respirator, but a non-medical face covering would suit you. And then the next thing here is that OSHA mandates that employers who are knowingly exposing workers to hazards must provide PPE appropriate to mitigate that risk at no cost to the employee. So without diving too far into the politics going on right now, it's safe to say that there's probably going to be a new cost of doing business for at least the immediate future. And if that means providing your workers or your employees or your service providers with the appropriate PPE to prevent risk, then we'll probably have to follow through with that to prevent doing more harm than good as we continue to move and reopen. So the biggest thing when conducting a hazard assessment and selecting PPE is making sure that you're picking the PPE appropriate. I don't think that somebody in an office is going to need a full hazmat suit, but somebody working in a morgue is more than likely going to want to be in full gear, Tyvek suit, full face respirator, your wrists and ankles taped to prevent any unnecessary exposure. The biggest thing with your face masks, your respirators, is to make sure that they're properly fitted and periodically refitted. If an employee has a beard, or if they gain or lose 5 pounds, you need to make sure that it fits them correctly. So make sure that the filters that you choose, if you are using respirators, are appropriate for the occupation. Commonly, you'll see the pink filters, and the one in this little diagram here, that is a P100 HEPA filter, but they also have filters that are good for filtering against organic gases or anything like that. So, another example, I don't think that a full face respirator needs to be on a bank teller, but somebody who is working in a restaurant as a dishwasher might benefit from a full face respirator, or at least a face shield to keep their face from getting affected by potential contaminants. They're spraying water, so things are splashing back on them. And then one thing that we really need to keep in mind, and I know it's been mentioned in the news before, but N95 respirators or higher levels of PPE. So basically any of your half face respirators, full face respirators, or supplied air respirators, they only protect the wearer. When you inhale, the air goes through the filters, but when you exhale, on most all of these style respirators, there's a small valve that opens up and unfiltered respiratory air comes straight out of that. So if it's not entirely necessary to protect that personal worker, the better alternative is just a simple cloth mask like we've been required in Denver anyhow. So Um, we will move on here to our focus, which is cleaning and disinfecting, right? So this is just a subset of all of your engineering controls, but it's a very important one. We are, we're physically acting on our workplace to prevent the spread of by cleaning and applying disinfectants. We also need to make sure we're training our employees and service providers on what we're doing and what our expectations are to make sure that it's done. So it's kind of a hybrid between our administrative controls and our engineering controls, but definitely a critical part of an overall plan for your reopening. The CDC and OSHA have outlined several points in different aspects as they relate to opening businesses. OSHA is going to be more concerned with the individual worker, and they'll break it down by risk level. So what is that employee's risk, and what needs to be cleaned? And then the CDC, who's going to be their audience is a broader approach to kind of all of America, and a lot of the things that we just covered are included in here, but there is are included in that plan development, but cleaning and disinfecting are a very key part. So we'll outline some of the recommendations here. Number one, this is routinely clean and disinfect your touch points, right? So routinely means establishing a schedule, following it, whether it's daily, nightly, weekly. Pick a schedule and stick to it, and make sure that it happens with routine. Touch points, I'm sure most of us are familiar. It's kind of a no-brainer, but your high traffic areas. So that's your doorknobs, your handles, crash bars, light switches, tables, countertops, and desks, and it goes on. Any office equipment, printers, copiers, vehicles for some service industries. The biggest thing is, if any of these are visibly or heavily soiled, they need to be cleaned first prior to disinfecting, and we'll cover that in a little bit. Obviously, we want to make sure our disinfectants are approved for use against COVID. We'll talk more about that. Also, the EPA has the N list, which I'm sure many of you have also heard of, which is a great place to start. There's thousands of products on there. They also have a similar viruses like SARS, H1N1, or other tuberculosis you might see on some products. If it is listed on those products, then it should be considered a viable alternative if you can't find or source anything that is on that EPA list. Again, we want to promote housekeeping by providing employees with disinfectant wipes, cleaner, or sprays, basically to supplement our cleaning regimen. This is just separate from our cleaning plan, but it is in addition to it. For example, you see a lot of restaurant employees that are spraying and wiping down tables after guests leave, which would normally be the responsibility of the busboy, and they probably wouldn't be spraying, a heavy disinfectant. It might just be a soap or detergent. So if you are providing staff who aren't normally cleaning or applying disinfectant, it's really important that you make sure that they know how to use the products and make sure that they're wearing the appropriate levels of PPE. If they need gloves, if they need respirators or eye protection, do they know the dwell times required on your disinfectants? Those are all things that we need to take into consideration on our cleaning and our disinfecting if we're using in-house employees that aren't normally doing this. So missed that key there, apologies. So cleaning is very important. Disinfecting is also very important. We need to talk about the differences so that we can establish exactly where it fits into our plan. So my assumption is that all of you have some sort of routine for cleaning established in your facilities, whether it's your janitorial staff or dedicated staff members, or through your building management company or something of that nature. So you've got something already involved. The only thing we really need to do is to increase the frequency with that. Cleaning, the basis of cleaning is to remove soils and surface contaminants. the way that is done is using soap or detergent to actually physically remove anything from surfaces. So while it can be very effective in removing germs and viruses, but it doesn't necessarily kill or neutralize them. So if you're using a rag to clean a table and you don't use a disinfectant on the rag after, that rag could potentially pass along virus or germ or anything afterwards. So cleaning does not kill or neutralize viruses or germs, but it can physically remove them from that surface. So it has to be done prior to disinfecting. Otherwise, if you've got a layer of filth or soil on top of a table or on a light switch or anything like that, viruses and germs can hide underneath there and become a problem later if that cleaning isn't done, and it can render your disinfecting useless. So disinfecting is different. Obviously, when applied correctly and according to manufacturer specs, they should kill almost every single germ and virus that they list on their label. Only when applied correctly, though. So you've got dwell times and everything. The label is a very important part. You can't just go buy a household disinfectant, spray it on, wipe it off, and expect to have done that correctly. The dwell time on there might be 5 to 10 minutes, and if you don't let it sit, it's not working. So they are not considered to be effective to remove soils from surfaces, although you do have a lot of products that will advertise that they can clean, they can deodorize, and they can disinfect. Generally speaking, for the purposes of the CDC's guidelines, cleaners and disinfectants are different. In our protocols and our plans and our recommendations, we agree. Your disinfectant application should be separate from your cleaning. So you're using a specialty cleaner to clean whatever it is that you need to, whether it's a hard surface or a porous surface or carpets, and then you use a disinfectant that's appropriate for the same thing. Anything that is approved for use in commercial settings must be approved by the EPA, all right? The EPA is going to confirm that the claims that they make, whether it's to kill H1N1, influenza, anything like that, that it actually does what it says it does in a laboratory setting. Obviously, they have to follow the directions of the manufacturer. So if it's apply, dwell for 10 minutes, and then clean, or wipe following it, they will ensure that it is on there. So anything on the EPA N list is confirmed to do what it does, what it says it does. Again, we've talked about dwell times, but we'll touch a little more here. Almost every single product you're going to see requires a dwell time. So any disinfectant that's going to kill human coronavirus will require a dwell time. You see some bleach-based products are between 1 to 2 minutes. Some are 10 minutes or more. And if you don't allow the disinfectant to dwell, it's not doing its job correctly, and it may not be getting everything that you anticipate that it is. The most common products you're going to see for disinfectants are going to come from either a bleach base, an ammonium chloride base, or hydrogen peroxide base. But as you'll see shortly, there are lots of different chemicals that are proven to be effective for killing human coronavirus. Here at Allphase, when we provide this service for our customers, we like to use a non-toxic botanical-based product, which uses a plant oil extract called thymol. But that's just our personal preference. There is a product on the EPA N list for it. We can talk a little bit more about that if you guys have questions regarding our preferences and where to get some of these things as well. So depending on the composition, the chemical composition or the active ingredients in there, some of these disinfectants are going to require a rinse or wipe following the application and dwell time. So, generally speaking, anything that's approved for use on a food service table or anything like that, food service prep, that's going to require a rinse following. So you need to make sure we're taking into consideration the appropriate disinfectants and cleaners. There are a lot of different options, and I'll show you some here in just a second. So this is a quick screen grab from the EPA N list. Again, there are thousands on here, but I wanted to show you. They break it down by the registration number, the active ingredients, the name, the company who makes it, what it's able to treat, the contact time or the dwell time, what the formulation type is, surface type that is approved for, and then your use site. So it's either going to be home or residential. So, as you can see, we've got quaternary ammonium, octonic acid, hydrogen peroxide, sodium hypochlorite. The biggest thing I want you to pay attention to again is on the bottom here, this Caltech SWAT 200. It is ready to use, but it's usable on hard, non-porous surfaces as well as food contact surfaces, but post-rinse required is what they are going to classify that as. And you've got a lot of different products that are going to be on the EPA N list that are listed for treatment of things other than human coronavirus as well. So you can filter all of these when you get on this website, and I'll provide that link shortly. You can filter them all by different headers, just like you would in an Excel spreadsheet or anything. So let's see. Move on to the next one here. So not everything is going to require an application of a disinfectant. Some things may only benefit from increased cleaning. Areas that are not frequently used or visited. So if you've got vacant spaces in your office, or if you've got storerooms that no one ever goes into, the risk of virus transmission in those areas is considered low. If people haven't been in there for a period of time they frequently do not go in there, then the CDC does not recommend creating a disinfectant regimen for those areas. Outdoor areas like patios and playgrounds, parking garages, front entryways aren't really a great place to apply your disinfectants. Certainly they will benefit from additional cleaning, but they're already in the outdoors, and applying a disinfectant out there is not going to be the most effective use of that. Again, what we do outside to prevent our transmission is our non-medical face coverings, and general social distancing protocols out there. Most of these areas should already have a cleaning schedule in place. So your playgrounds or your outdoor patios. And the only thing the CDC recommends here is just to increase the frequency with which they are cleaned. The biggest thing, playgrounds, well, I'm not sure how many facilities you guys have that will have those. It's hard to maintain social distancing on playgrounds. So in most cases, it's better to keep those closed rather than to apply a cleaning schedule for those. Also, the CDC is going to say, if you haven't had anybody in a facility for over 7 days, that it should be considered safe for reentry following a normal cleaning protocol. They state that the virus has not been shown to survive on surfaces for longer than 7 days. But again, keep in mind your HVAC systems, your plumbing, you want to make sure that you go through and include those in your cleaning and your prep process to get your employees or your customers back into your businesses. Now, we've gone over what should be clean, but our disinfectant application should definitely go on our touch points, right? The main focus for our touch point disinfection is going to be our common high traffic areas. Some places are going to have more. It's dependent on your building. It's dependent on the use of the space. Everything is going to be unique. So you need to take stock of your whole business and see where your people are traveling through. And you may need to increase your disinfectant application to be effective. Most all touch points are by design hard and non-porous. So your doorknobs, your crash bars, your tables, they're designed to be easily cleaned, and as such are easily disinfected. Almost every single chemical that's on the EPA N list is going to be approved for use on those surfaces. Though again, you have to make sure that it doesn't require a follow-up rinse or wipe afterwards. Your touch points are the easiest to clean and easiest to disinfect, and they shouldn't normally suffer from damage from increased cleaning or application of the appropriate disinfectant as well. But the big thing to consider is because your touch points aren't always touched in the same spot. For instance, you see on the exit from a bathroom or the entrance to a bathroom, you have the wear marks on that brass plate. I don't personally touch those. I try and touch a different place on that door so that I don't touch where everybody else does. But because of that very reason, the CDC says clean 12 to 15 inches beyond the normal touch points so that we avoid, missing some areas. One other consideration that we have to talk about for disinfecting is our soft or porous surfaces. Right now there are only 2 disinfectants on the N list that are used for porous applications, and then both of those are specific for use only in laundry pre-soak cycles. So that would be throwing some garments or other textiles into the washing machine, allowing that to soak in this, and it would be disinfected. The issue is that your chairs and your couches and your carpets can have contaminants beyond the surface level and in the cushion or the padding, and a surface application of disinfectant may not reach those. CDC recommendations for these are to clean items using the warmest appropriate water setting. So think steam cleaning for carpets, so your upholstery. The CDC states that we're saying between 130 to 150 degrees, you will start to inactivate the virus. So the higher the temperature and the longer the heat exposure, the more effective it can be. For someone to truly steam clean your carpet, that temperature is 212 degrees. So higher temperature, more effective. We do provide an application of disinfectant, all phase we do, on surfaces after a deep clean, just as a precautionary step. Anything that might settle on the surface can still be disinfected with an application. So the equipment that we're using for cleaning really shouldn't differ from anything that you've got. You should have pretty much everything available to you. If you've already got a janitorial staff, or if you're using the service provider, they should have everything. Should be really a no-brainer. The biggest change in your cleaning protocol is just the frequency with which you do it. So specialty equipment really only be your less frequent cleaning. So steam cleaning. I don't think that everybody has a steam cleaner or access to one. But as far as specialty equipment, it's really just that. The increased frequency does mean that you might have some more wear and tear on your equipment. So investing in something high quality, if you're going to reopen, instead of buying the cheap spray bottle from Home Depot, buy one that's going to last a little bit longer, stand up to a little bit more abuse, just so you don't have to interrupt your service plan for any reason. Janitorial service, if you're using one, should already have something that's going to be used day in, day out. So shouldn't have to make that recommendation to them, but if you are doing this in-house, or if you are having employees who don't normally do this, make sure you're invested in some higher quality equipment. We want to make sure that the proper detergents are used when we're cleaning. Again, not a problem if you're using the janitorial services. They should already know what is needed to clean what surfaces. Most all cleaners and detergents are going to have their recommended uses on the labels, as well as the directions for use, and importantly, what PPE, if any, is required to use those. So again, if you guys are having employees or people who are not normally applying these disinfectants, make sure they know exactly what they need to do and how to use those products. So next, we will move on to what some of the things that are more close to my wheelhouse, the stuff that we're using every day. There we go. So most of your application disinfectants to your touch points are something that you can do with common cleaning tools. So spray bottles, pump sprayers, rags, buckets, these are all things that you can use in your disinfectant application. But sometimes you have to understand that when we're applying disinfectants, that's what we're doing. We're not disinfecting. There's no way to see COVID-19 with our bare eyes. So we have to rely on the manufacturer's labels and application instructions to do the best that we can to try and disinfect. If you spray a disinfectant on a surface and somebody comes by and sneezes on it right after, if it's beyond that dwell time, that disinfectant is not doing its job and you'll have to redo it. So paying attention to that is necessary, and making that clear to your employees is important as well. When we're applying our disinfectants, PPE becomes much more of a concern. A lot of the disinfectants are going to have things that might be toxic to humans. It might be respiratory issues for applying bleach. No one wants to inhale bleach dust or scent or anything like that. So if we are having employees do it, make sure that we're paying special attention to the PPE required. Some of the specialty equipment that we're using in our industry to help will be, let's see, ULV foggers are pretty much the most common that are used to apply beyond your normal cleaning supplies, so spray bottles. Now we've got two different types pictured here. One of those, the top one is considered a bullet style, and the other is affectionately known as an elephant nose. But these use pressurized air and specialized nozzles to create an ultrafine mist. So they may have more than one nozzle. As you can see, that bullet fogger has 3. The elephant nose generally only has 1. They range, their application range is from 10 to about 15 feet. So you can adequately apply your disinfectant to broad areas quickly. And that's the real benefit of them. They can cover large areas quickly, and they are very useful, very efficient in their application. Because they create such a fine mist, they use very little disinfectant. And the smaller the particle, the better the chance of it actually coming into contact with a contaminant. They're also extremely useful in getting into hard to reach places, so places that your cleaning crews aren't normally going to touch. So nooks and crannies. You can use them in HVAC systems. The CDC does have specific recommendations for HVAC cleaning, and the furnaces and air handlers are separate than ductwork. But you also have to take into account that not all disinfectants, as a matter of fact, very few of them are approved for use in foggers. And when you're using foggers, you definitely have to make sure you have the correct PPE on. You are spraying a chemical that can be toxic into the air, so goggles to protect the eyes and a half-face respirator at a minimum. In our experience with these machines is that it provides a very quick setup time to prep your work area to use or apply your disinfectant, and that you don't have to do too much other than covering your very sensitive areas. So we don't use these in server rooms certainly, but you can go through a normal office or a food service, as long as you're using the right chemical, again, the right disinfectant. You can go in and quickly fog the area and get full coverage very quickly, and you're being efficient with your use of your chemicals. So it goes a long way. Most restoration contractors, us included, are going to have these readily available, but they aren't too expensive. I know a lot of retailers were inflating their prices very high, but these are something that can be easily acquired if they're available at your supplier or local supplier, and they're not too expensive. They range from anywhere from $200 to $500 depending on the type, and it's something that you could consider investing in for your team to add just an extra layer of protection and a quick way to disperse your disinfectant and apply it to your surfaces. The next machine here, this is an electrostatic fogger, which is they're pretty neat. That's a backpack variant. You can get a backpack variant for a ULV fogger as well. The main difference between the two is that an electrostatic fogger uses a negative charge to charge the disinfectant as it comes out, or whatever you're applying, but it uses a negative charge to it charges the disinfectant negatively, and then that floating in the air, you've got positive charge on your building and your surfaces, and the disinfectant will be drawn to it and it will cover it in a very even manner. So the biggest benefit here is that if you got a vertical surface and you want to make sure you've got a product that has a long dwell time, maybe 10, 15 minutes, if you apply that disinfectant to a wall, ideally you shouldn't be doing it so heavy that you have water or moisture beading on the wall, but if you do it properly with an electrostatic fogger, there's no risk of it falling or gravity taking hold and preventing that dwell time from being effective in that area that you treat. These machines are a little bit more expensive just because they're a little bit more complicated, so you don't see them too often. And we definitely recommend against using them in server rooms or around sensitive equipment. The one thing we'll say regarding the foggers is if you are using them correctly, you're not setting off smoke detectors or fire alarms or anything. If your application, if you're using the correct disinfectants or chemicals, there's really no cleanup needed afterwards. If you're not using a chemical that's if you're using a chemical that is approved for use in a ULV fogger or an electrostatic, for that matter, generally you can get away with spraying and not wiping after, as that chemical is sprayed on so thin that it doesn't bead, it doesn't moisture damage any paper or personal effects or anything. If you got more questions on the chemicals and the application process, we'll go over those here at the end. The next machine that you may see, and you may have your contractors or people pushing, is hydroxyl machines. And please excuse me, I'm definitely not a scientist or an engineer, so this is going to be a quick overview of our function. But essentially they're using UV light to break up water vapor that's in the air, and in doing so, they create something called a hydroxyl radical. Those hydroxyl radicals will interact with airborne contaminants of all types and sizes, and they basically, through a process of oxidation, essentially the same way water will rust iron, they break down the structures of those contaminants. So the primary purpose and their kind of their use in our industry, in the restoration industry, is to deal with odor, similar to ozone machines. But they have been proven effective, and many of these manufacturers claim that they are extremely effective. But they have been proven effective to break down airborne contaminants and viruses if they come in contact to them. And unlike an ozone machine, which some of you may have heard of, they are safe for use while you have human occupants in the building. A lot of them are they're basically a UV light, like a tanning bed light, and a fan. You can see that little one there has that blue glow. That's a contained unit. The bigger one up there requires a separate fan, but you have those hydroxyl radicals, and you disperse those throughout your areas. We set those up here in our office, in our locker rooms, to help mitigate any additional risk for our guys that are going in there and having to switch out, in addition to our social distancing practice. So the next machine we're going to talk about, air scrubbers. We're not using these specifically for disinfecting. These are used in both cleaning, disinfecting plans, campaigns. Almost all of these machines are going to have a HEPA filter in them, and then one or two pre-filters. And these aren't your normal HEPA filter, shop vac HEPA filters you can get from Home Depot. These are tightly sealed. You've got your main intake port on this blue one here, right in the middle. You can see there's a pre-filter in it, and then below that is a HEPA filter that's sealed to the edges. And then on the right side there, you've got an exhaust port. Now, the reason why I bring these up is that if you do have a COVID positive, or you have a situation where you're doing a heavy clean, maybe you've got a summer camp where you are planning on having quite a few people come through, or you've got a museum or something. We use these to establish negative pressure in our work areas, our cleaning areas. There's a little bit of a diagram down there below that. Essentially, if you duct the exhaust to the exterior of the building, you're removing air from that specific area, and it creates negative pressure. So when you're cleaning, if you've got negative pressure in there, if you stir anything up in your cleaning process before you get to the disinfecting process, anything that goes airborne, the hope is that it goes through the filters. The particulate gets caught in one of the 3 filters that are in the machine, and if it somehow bypasses all of that, it gets ducted to the exterior. It's no longer inside. So a lot of times you'll see hospitals in their high impact rooms, or their Ebola or any emerging disease rooms, they'll have negative air pressure systems built in, so that when that door opens up to one of those exam rooms, negative pressure is formed so that nothing can escape with them. And we do something similar with our machines if we're setting up our room. So like I said, not something that goes straight to the disinfecting or cleaning in of itself, but it is a supplement that we use to help prevent spread that way. So now I've gone over everything, as far as equipment wise. The biggest thing here is, again, developing a plan. Cleaning and disinfecting is only a small part of it, but it's part of it nonetheless. And in my opinion, one of the more important ones. It's very important that all aspects of the plan are written down. But as you might be relying on a janitorial staff or somebody else or another service provider to provide your cleaning and disinfecting protocols, you need to be able to separate it and send it and share it very easily. Again, the plan needs to be easily shared with all of your employees and all of your constituents. But again, if you're having somebody else come in and do it for you, you need to be able to share your plan with them so they can achieve your goals. Or you can rely on somebody else to provide that for you. And you need to have a record of it if that's what they're going to actually do. You see a lot of people, a lot of businesses are sharing, their approaches. You probably don't need to tell your customers exactly what you're using to clean and disinfect, but communicating that you are doing that is important, not only just for customer peace of mind, but just to reinforce that everybody as a community has adopted these practices. Some of your customers may ask you, what you're using, and it's imperative that you do have that on hand so you can provide it to them. Same with your employees. So if they have any sensitivities or anything, or if they've got somebody that they do need to get out into your facility that's sensitive, they can at least review that so they don't put any additional risk on those folks. So it is also very important to have a contingency as part of your plan for additional chemicals or alternative chemicals, disinfectants, cleaners, or PPE if supplies become scarce. I know, March and April, it was almost impossible to source any disinfectants. It was, everybody was in short supply. Nobody was preemptive in ordering it. It was difficult to get. So having a backup option is definitely an important part of that plan. The next most important plan, I missed a bullet point there. The next most important aspect of your plan is to assign a responsible individual for it. I know most of you may be familiar with our SMART goal settings. SMART being S as in strategic, M as in measurable, A as in assign a responsible individual. Anyhow, someone should be assigned to oversee the cleaning and disinfecting. That may mean assigning a new employee to that, or adding it into the overall boss's plan, or somebody of that nature, or relying on a service provider to do it for you, whether it's your janitorial staff or another contractor. But that person also needs to be responsible to ensure that cleaning and disinfecting is done according to the schedule outlined. How frequently, determining when your areas are being cleaned, and the frequency that it's done with throughout the day. You need to decide, are you going to clean before everybody opens? Or are you going to clean, after everything is closed? Do you have to do that multiple times throughout the day? Do you need to close down a certain area to allow for your cleaning to be done without potentially harming employees or customers? The CDC recommends at least a daily cleaning of touch points. So determining, if you've got a higher traffic area that needs more attention, that should be assigned to that person who is responsible for overseeing the plan, whether it's the cleaning and disinfecting or the plan in general. Obviously, the size of the facility is an important aspect of that. The other thing we need to consider for our plan is are there other options for a longer term change that can alleviate some of our needs? So some of these options are, maybe switching from, not everybody will have the budget to do this, and I understand that, but as a recommendation from the CDC, I'm passing this along. Switching from cloth chairs to something that's a hard surface, so plastic chairs. I don't know that I can see too many people doing that, but switching from a more porous upholsterer to a leather or a pleather can be beneficial. But again, those aren't the only options. You can also prop your doors open during business hours, so people don't have to grab a door handle to open it up, or you can install an automatic door opener. A lot of facilities are going to have a handicap accessible doors. These can be modified either to be open full time, or you can put in a motion sensor. Again, obviously there are costs associated with that, but we have to weigh the costs associated with those things versus what it takes to clean and disinfect. So if people are they don't need to open a door or touch a door to go in and out of the building, it won't need to be cleaned quite as frequently. So part of the plan process is maintaining that plan and making sure that you're doing your routines, following your schedules, and making sure that you're actually being effective. So one of the things that we hear here in our industry and not just for COVID response is the white glove test. So we want to evaluate our plan, make sure it's working, and keep it updated. The individual that you assign to oversee your cleaning and disinfecting should also be the one responsible for making sure that it's working. So that's performing white glove tests. Obviously can't see coronavirus on a surface with our own eye, but you can see dirt on a surface, or you can use a white towel to wipe a surface and make sure that there's nothing on there, no soiling or anything. If it does fail a white glove test, that's enough indication that that you need to do more cleaning. So getting closer here to the end of this, obviously, if you keep seeing your inspections that are, if you get failing results in your white glove test, you obviously need to make a change somewhere. And then the other thing that I want to make clear to everybody that the CDC is very, blunt with, is that there's still a lot left to learn. New information is coming out daily. New guidelines should be expected, and the modification to your cleaning plan might be necessary. But the hope is that if we are following our plans and modifying them, making sure that they're working, especially the cleaning and disinfecting that we're doing, that we're preventing our spread and keeping everybody safe as we kind of reopen up. So that's kind of the gist of everything I've got. Open it up for questions, and I thank you all for bearing with that one a little bit longer than I had intended. But if you want to go ahead and I'll stop the screen share here. We'll answer some of our questions. Let me scroll through the text.
I think our first question was, where can training be found for a company that is thinking on purchasing the disinfecting machine?
So that's from Byron over there. Byron, that's an interesting question, really. Your supplier, wherever you're getting that machine, hopefully should be able to provide you with some of that. I know All Phase here, we are certainly able to provide you with that training and the locations of where you can get some of this equipment and the right chemicals. So certainly from us, I know there's a few other members in IFMA with the partners like Belfour and some of our other restoration contractors that are working that you can look to. I'm certainly happy to provide as much information as I can to you. And we'll certainly get your email if I can here and follow up with you on that if you're interested in more of that.
And then are we going to have a copy of the slides for today to give to the attendees?
Absolutely, yeah. So my hope is to send out a follow-up email that's got all of my contact info along with all the slides here. All right, grab that email real quick so that you can all reference it as well as the notes on there. So
excellent. Are there any other questions? Please type them now into your chat. I think that's all. And Vimal had to drop off, but thank you again for everything that you've given us today. And if you have any additional questions, I'll put this information also on our website. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time. Have a good day.